So the UK economy unexpectedly grew in the final 3 months of the year following a boost to construction and services sector. It expanded by 0.1%. We were on recession watch for a long period of time, I think. So there will be a sigh of relief from number 11 that the economy did grow by 0.1%. What is interesting about this, they also looked at living standards. This is growth, GDP per capita, and said they have dropped. The worry, I think, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this. I mean, I don't think we're in particularly buoyant economic health.
No. And so this is why, look, as a financial journalist, I unbelievably appreciate how some of these numbers are, I mean, just a little bit pointless, right? A lot of this is, you know, what measures they're using, and growth is 0.1, and, you know, inflation is this and that. And people listening are going, so?
Yeah.
You don't need to tell me. Right?
Yeah.
You don't need to give me a figure.
Things are expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The things are going up, that I feel squeezed. That, I mean, take April, for example, water bills going up by, you know, £100. Council tax in some areas going up by over 9%. Right? Energy bills, as we spoke about earlier, are going up. I don't need to tell anybody what figures are coming out for them to know that this doesn't feel great. The economic figures, again, and we spoke about this, and I said, oh, you know, 1%, 0.1% schmentz. It's not because I find it necessarily boring. It's because I find it just it's so marginal. So, you know, what does recession mean? Well, it technically means, you know, 2 quarters or 2 3-month periods of declining economic growth, right? So falling GDP. That doesn't mean anything to anyone, really, does it? And 0.1%, you know, what's 0.1% between friends? Well, it's the difference of saying we're in recession or we're not. But the reality is the same.
OK, but the reality is, what does the Exchequer do about it? And so the worry is, from my very limited understanding of economics, so we believe that inflation is going to rise again. We believe.
Yeah, so look, I mean, the Bank of England, when they came out with the interest rate cut recently, said that they expect inflation to go to about 3.7%, I think, in April, as a result of increased energy costs. Now, you know, that's nowhere near what it was, you know, in October 2022, I think it was, when we reached over 11%.
Yeah, extraordinary.
But again, inflation is one of those figures that they take, you know, they measure it by taking this sort of basket of goods. It's, you know, thousands of different items, and they measure it and how much they've gone up by. But your personal inflation will be very, very different. So it depends on what you spend your money on, etc. So that's by the by. But it is a general way of saying that the price of things are going up. And the thing is, we've already had to, you know, take on board, what is it, over 20% food inflation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's food and energy that are the ones that hit people the hardest, because it's the ones that you can't
But that's also very tangible. You go into a supermarket, 3 items, 20 quid.
Yeah, look, it's going up. What does this mean for the government is essentially what you're asking there. It doesn't actually mean anything different. We know that the economy is really stagnant at the moment. The government are naturally going to be very worried about it, which is why we're hearing so much noise about growth. Desperate for growth. We had this week all this speculation about cash ISAs, the very tax-friendly savings products
which
that
people like. We spoke about this
earlier. People
earlier.
love them. There's over 400 billion sat around in cash ISAs at the moment, and the government are desperate. Well, actually, it was city bosses that, in a meeting with Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, said, look, if we could put some of that to use in the UK by investing it, wouldn't that be great for growth? And it might be great for people because their money works harder in investments. But, you know, whether we should force people to do that, I think, is slightly different. But the reality is, we've got a spring budget coming up. What is Rachel Reeves going to do to try to stimulate economic growth? The headroom that she thought she had, that no longer is there. Is she going to stick to her fiscal rules, which is basically that debt must start falling as a percentage of GDP in the next 5 years, and we must keep to within our budget? You know, they were self-imposed.
They were.
Would she perhaps move those around? I don't.
Well, she said she won't.
I don't think that's likely. What we've got in the newspapers this morning, I think it's page 2 of the Telegraph, is the fact that what we might see instead, actually, it's on page 1. There we go.
Freezing the bands.
Reeves mulls stealth income tax rise. Basically, how we pay income tax, we pay it in bands. Above a certain amount, you pay a bit more, basically, or a lot more.
Yeah.
those bands at roughly 12,570 for paying no tax. The same, about 50,000 for, you know, up to 20%, and then you go to 125, and then you're paying the 45, the full whack. Those thresholds have been frozen since 2021. They are, and that was by a Conservative government. Let's make no bones about it. We are in we're in a tax mess because we've been massively taxed because of the Conservative government, right? It just seems the Labour's not doing a lot about it. This is apolitical of me, just to say everybody's stuffed up, really. But we've got this, those thresholds frozen until 2028-29. Now, of course, as pay goes up naturally, because the cost of living is going up, you would expect pay to go up. You would also expect those thresholds to go up. They are not. So beyond 2028-29 is a really long time to hold them. Now, the government promised, the current government, that they would not increase income tax, VAT and national insurance. And it seems to be another way, another semantics here, another way of just increasing something but without actually increasing or saying they will. So the national insurance on employers. Well, we're not increasing taxes on workers. No, you really are.
Yeah, well, they said they wouldn't increase national insurance, and they said, oh, no, well, no, employers' national insurance contribution doesn't count.
And the OBR says 75% of that will fall on employers anyway. So employees.
Of course it will.
Exactly. And what they're doing here is, and governments love freezing thresholds. We've seen it with inheritance tax, capital gains tax, anything that has a threshold, you can freeze it because it drags more people into paying that higher rate. What we're seeing, the problem is, so at £100,000, we've got this weird quirk in the system. £100,000 is a lot of money, but soon it won't be, and that threshold that we're talking about won't mean anything. But you lose your personal allowance, you lose child benefits, you lose all sorts of benefits. What we're seeing is this perverse system where people are not wanting to get that pay rise or not working more because they don't want to breach that £100,000. So if you want to have growth, you really need to start looking at the tax system. And if you want people to work and work harder, they need to feel rewarded. They're saying this may raise $4 billion, but at what cost? Really, at what cost?
Well, 100%. But it's like the winter fuel allowance as well. At what cost was that?
But there's so, like I said earlier, we counted all of those bills that are going up, etc. So much of our economy is built on confidence.
Which there isn't any.
Consumer confidence,
and business confidence.
And we are reading in the papers as well that it's as low as you'd expect among the super wealthy. We knew that. But also, if people don't feel confident to spend, they're not going to encourage growth, etc., etc. So I just think, going back to that 0.1 figure, it is a disastrous figure for the government. Whether it's recession or not, 0.1% is rubbish, and they need to start looking at ways.
And I'm glad you said that, because of course there's this big article saying that actually, yes, Starmer narrowly avoids this technical recession. Alarms going off everywhere. I've got the Growth Commission saying it's really appalling. The IEA also saying the budget fallout is dragging the private sector into recession. I'll have to go to a break. Those of you getting in touch, I'm asking about J.D. Vance's speech. Was it out of line, out of order, or was he spot on? I said this right at the beginning of the show, if you weren't awake. I had someone message saying, I'm absolutely furious with J.D. Vance's speech. I'm furious that it took an American to say exactly what a British leader should have said in this country. Let me know all of your thoughts on that, please. So many of you getting in touch about that. Also about Boris Johnson. There's a rumour that he is thinking about coming back into the Conservative Party, possibly as leader. I don't think Kemi Badenoch knows about that. And many of you getting in touch about that. I think Boris deserves a fair crack of the whip. He was an amazing leader at the Olympics 2012. I would agree with that. He is a character. He was betrayed by Sunak, who wanted the job. Boris is Britain's best hope for greatness. That's Jeff Huntley in Aberdeenshire. Good morning, and thank you for that. Everyone on the front bench of Labour have not a Scooby about the job they're undertaking. Boris says himself was great for the country. That's Vincent. Boris back as leader, says Steve. It'd be just like the captain of the Titanic holding the anchor chain as the ship went down. We'll take a call now. Jim is in Dorset wanting to talk about J.D. Vance. Good morning to you.
Well, good morning, David. Good morning, Georgie. Great show as always.
Thank you very much.
Very understated shirt, David, but Georgie should definitely open the pattern for England, because we're not very good at the moment, are we?
Sorry, say that last bit again.
Georgie should open the batting for England.
Yes, you should.
The one-day international.
Yes, you should open the batting for England.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Right, so J.D. Vance, right, so he has caused huge headlines, which is across pretty much every front page this morning. He's essentially saying, you betrayed Brexit, you are allowing unfettered immigration into this country and across Europe. No one asked for that. Your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, isn't it nice to have a breath of fresh air, somebody who actually says what they mean, a conviction politician, who J.D. Vance is and who Donald Trump is, who actually says what he means and what he feels. And if we only had that in Europe, because I'm pretty sure the majority of European voters believe what he's saying and agree with what he's saying and don't believe what their governments are telling them.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? And of course, he was there. He was meant to be speaking about Ukraine, a deal, Trump talking to Putin. He didn't do that. He turned his fire on Europe, political correctness, the lack of control over immigration, the lack of integration. I think many people in this country will be sitting there thinking, J.D. Vance is spot on. And you can tell that the political parties are rattled because they are so angry about the outburst.
Yeah, well, whenever there's rage, there's a problem. And if a party rages against something, that means they're not looking inside. And you probably know as well as I do, David, that there's most of the parties in this country are not looking inside themselves. They're blaming the voters for what the voters believe. But the voters believe what they believe. And the only conviction politician we have in this country at the moment as a leader is Nigel Farage. It's as simple as that.
Fascinating call, Jim. Thank you very much for your time. That's Jim in Dorset. Georgie, let's just go back and talk about... I just want to finish this thing on the economy. So we've seen... And I'm really pleased you said that. It's pretty disastrous to have growth of 0.1%. You've seen other European countries growing much faster than we are. Just in terms of interest rates, we mentioned that inflation is expected to rise. We have seen mortgage rates starting to fall. The question is, are they pricing in future interest rate cuts now? Certainly, if you talk to different financial advisors, they'll all tell you something slightly different. That's because no one actually knows what is about to happen. We've got another MPC meeting taking place next month. I'm not putting you on the spot and saying what is going to happen, but what is going to happen?
I mean, personally, I probably wouldn't think that there is going to be an interest rate cut until we see perhaps the fallout from the national insurance rises and all that sort of things. Look, we might get, and this is totally speculation, nobody knows, we might get a couple of incremental cuts through the year. What you're really asking, what people mostly want to know is, you know, what's going to happen to mortgage rates, right?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Oh, wow, yeah, you don't happen to have your mortgage rate. So basically, we've seen 7 mortgage lenders cut rates recently. Which we naturally, as journalists, we ask, well, is this, you know, a sign of things to come? Because when we had the interest rate cut very recently, most of the mortgage lenders had priced that in. So you didn't see a huge movement, but we have seen rates now fall to below 4%. People who've been used to the sort of almost sub 1% that we get, I'm so sorry, it's not coming back. Right, let's just get that out now. I mean, it might come back, but you know, it would be highly unlikely we're going to get some of the rates that we've had, you know, a few years ago, I'm sorry to say, which is why we're having so many problems with people coming off their old deals now onto new ones and seeing hundreds of pounds extra a month.
Or doubling of their mortgage.
The question is, should you wait? Now, again, it depends on the mortgage lenders you speak to. I think the vast majority say that while we are getting some better rates recently, something called swap rates, so the rates at which banks lend to each other, and it's influenced by lots of things like inflation, economic sentiment, you know, interest rates, etc. They're actually quite high still at the moment. And you're very rare to get rates fall below what the average is for swap rates, and the swap rates are just below 4%. So until they come down is a long-winded way of saying it's unlikely we're going to see a huge glut. It's because it makes it very expensive for banks to lend to you at a rate.
If they can't lend or borrow.
If they're borrowing from banks,
yeah,
like it's you know, it's pure economics here on this one, right? They're not going to give you a great deal if they're not getting money back in return, or if they're not getting a good deal. So, will we see it? Not unless we see those come down. Not unless, and this all goes back to, you know, growth, you know, in the country, interest rates falling, inflation getting better, all of these sorts of things all feed in. So the advice then would be, so you can lock into rates between 3 and even up to 9 months, which means if you find a good deal now, but you don't need to remortgage for, let's say, 6 months.
Yeah.
You can lock into a deal that should another better deal come later down the road before you actually buy another house, or, sorry, you remortgage, you can actually almost break that contract, as it were, and get the better deal.
But how long do you have to do that? Because I thought it was only like 10 days or something once you'd accepted a rate.
So, no. So you've got basically you can do it now,
right? And
if you don't have to remortgage, when's your remortgage?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Let's say it's 6 months, right?
It's about that.
About 6 months. You could look. I would start looking now. I would speak to a mortgage broker, because they know the market and they can find the best deals for you. Because obviously the best deals will be given to those people with the greatest amount of money, the greatest equity in their home, you know, the most deposit, right? Of course they will, but they can also sort of wheedle out, especially if you're a freelancer. It helps. Because you've got, you know, income that's perhaps not as regular. But so
that's an understatement.
Yes, right. Just how do I put this? So I would speak, but if you are hoping to wait, I would always say this, and I actually got asked this by my taxi driver the other day, is, you know, what do you do? And I said, look, and this is about buying a home. Should I buy a home as well? You know, your home is your home. If it makes money at the end of the day and it's an investment, then brilliant, right? But, you know, now the best time is when you need to do it. And the best time here actually is, you know, we can't say as experts whether we're going to see rates, unless, like I said, those swap rates come down. I don't think that mortgage rates, even if the Bank of England lower interest rates, are going to come down a huge amount. So if you find a good deal now, again, like I said, lock in. But you have that sort of 3 to 9 months. It depends on the lender, of course. With which you can lock in and not commit to that rate if you find something better. So I really recommend doing that, and I really recommend speaking to a broker who will, like I say, know the whole of, speak to a whole of market broker who will know, let's be honest, more than you about it.
I think everyone knows more than me about this subject. Georgie, thanks very much indeed. We'll